volume smallformfactor.net's podcast. I am Josh Ramirez, co-founder both of Minutia and of Primary Industries, and today we're actually joined by three people. First off, I'm going to turn the mic to James Schell, a fellow co-founder of both companies. James, how you doing?
Oh, doing good. Just it's way too early, but yeah.
Yeah. I may have overslept a little bit. Just a little bit. Yeah. I got you. We're also joined today by John Morrison of New Zealand fame. How you doing, John?
It's too late. Also, greetings from the bottom of the planet. We're at 30 degrees and 100% humidity.
Enjoy it. It's like the exact opposite of that up here in Boston. We're also joined today by a gentleman that actually wasn't with us during the last program, but is with us now, Jay Mattison of Tech Everything fame. How are you doing, Jay?
I'm doing fantastic. It is not too early or too late. It is just right.
We all just like to complain. You'll learn that. All right, gents. So I figured we'd just jump straight into the news. We actually have a fair amount of stuff to go through that we want to talk about for this program. The first item we have in our notes regards the Fractal Design Define Nano S, which I believe Fractal Design introduced relatively recently. But one of the main reasons we want to talk about this, and this will sort of expand to some other announcements by other companies, is basically with regards to the size. Now, obviously, typically we're going to be inclined to talk about computers that are small or at least space efficient, and that's sort of our area of interest. But this case, which you can, I'll add to the show notes, and we actually do have a news report on Small Form Factor about it, as well as a thread on the forum. This case is in the neighborhood of 26.8 liters, even though it's an ITX only enclosure, which is very, very, very large for the hardware you can actually put into it, which has led to a lot of consternation among small form factor enthusiasts, if only because it's sort of like, well, you're supporting the right hardware, but you're not making enough sort of compromises or decisions with the enclosure itself to make it truly small form factor, even though it only supports ITX and it has all these hardware limitations because of that choice. So I was just curious as to what you guys thought about this, if only because it's always nice to have more choice, but this really doesn't feel like a genuine micro, or not even micro, mITX enclosure or small form factor enclosure, purely due to the fact that the volume is still so large. James, I was curious as to what you thought.
Okay, so I know we like to hate on big ITX cases, but I mean, a couple people made good points in the forum that this isn't really aimed at us. It's really aimed more at people who currently have a like an ATX system. And so this is the type of case that would let them, all they need is just an ITX motherboard, and they can plop in all their existing hardware for the most part, and they're good to go. And so it's really, I mean, I really do wish that like people like Fractal and BitPhoenix would make truly small cases, but I think it's important to remember that these do serve a purpose, and they can kind of serve as like a gateway to like a truly small system. So I mean, I think we need to keep that in mind. But overall, though, I mean, it is still, even considering that, it's still too big. Yeah, it's just, I mean, like the top radiator mount, I don't think it really needs it. I mean, because like, why would you need like a 240, and then I think you can do a 280 on the front? Yeah.
Yes.
Like, why would you need that much radiator? That's just excessive for a mini ITX. I mean, unless you're going to do a 295X2 and then like the X99 Ace Rock ITX board with like a overclocked 5960X, like even then, I don't think you would really need that much radiator. And that's a really, really niche target there. I mean, most people are going to do like an i5, like a 6600K or something like that, with like a GTX 980 or like a R9 390 or something like that. Like a 240 and a 280 millimeter rad's just way too much. And then the other thing is, I'm not 100%, but I think some people were saying that the the top radiator mount doesn't even work if you have the Asus impact board because of the VRM daughter board. Like, because on the Asus impact, the VRM daughter board has like a little back plate on it. That's part of the heatsink, and so it sticks out a little bit past the edge of the board. I think it interferes with a top radiator in this case, which some people are saying that Fractal should be okay because Asus is the one not adhering to the ITX spec. But on the other hand, the impact's popular. I mean, it's really, I mean, if you're talking like this much radiator space, the impact's a good candidate for that. So for people who are heavily overclocking, and it's only been out like in different iterations for like 4 years now. So that seems like a huge oversight. So not only is it almost 27 liters, excluding the feet and like the rear PCI tab, it still can't fit a radiator on top with one of the most popular high-end ITX boards. So yeah, it's just, I mean, I get why it exists, but it's still too big even at that. But I don't know, it's just, that's just kind of my thoughts on it. I mean, the other thing is like, it's just like the ATX power supply, you just can see how much space it takes up. Like, I mean, it's still a little too early for it, I guess, but I'd really like to see like just traditional layouts like this, just kind of shrunk down a little bit by using like a SFX-L or even SFX power supplies. I think that would, like, if that could really become like kind of the, like, especially SFX-L, if it could become like the standard, and just in place of ATX, I mean, that would still let them take kind of a traditional layout like this and just reduce it to something more reasonable. But because that's the other thing is, like, unless you're doing, like I said, that crazy overclocked 5960X with the Radeon 295X2, there's really nothing that you could normally put in here that would need an ATX power supply that you couldn't power with like the SFX or SFX-L. But that's just my thoughts on it. So I'd be curious what the rest of you think.
No, I mean, I think overall I agree. I think, you know, as I alluded to when I was introducing this, you know, it just seems that they did a very, very poor job of making compromises. Like the fact that they're supporting both a 280 and 240 radiator when I just can't fathom what kind of hardware would actually justify needing all of that. You know, that's just the beginning, but then, you know, all the support for storage, and then they add these generous amounts of volume and space to do cable routing beneath the back of the case, and you know, they have pre-drilled holes in all of this, so they have like all these areas where they intend for you to be able to fit pumps and reservoirs, and just, you know, they're all individual decisions that might be justifiable in isolation, but then you add them up all together, and all of a sudden you have a case that's practically twice as large as it really needs to be. And in trying to satisfy everyone, it seems to really satisfy no one, because it's just a heavily, heavily compromised design. You know, and what's frustrating to me is that overall, like as a company, as a brand, and in terms of sort of the design sense, the aesthetic that they go for, I tend to really quite like Fractal design. You know, I think they have a nice sort of elegant, modern, understated appeal. And I've generally only heard good things about the quality of the enclosures they make. You know, the reason I don't like this enclosure is not because it's poorly made or it looks ugly. It looks fine, maybe not terribly inspired, but it looks good for what it is. It's just the fact that, like, this is an enclosure that was tried to be built for everyone, you know, both people that are already sort of in small form factor, or maybe people that are thinking of downsizing. And because of that fact, it's really actually built for no one. I don't think anyone's going to be particularly well served or is going to specifically enjoy this enclosure, because there's just too much going on. There's too much that any individual enthusiast is not going to be happy with, because they just weren't able to sort of, you know, hammer their foot in the ground and say, no, these, you know, this is too much. We need to focus. We need to focus who this is for. We need to focus on the design.
The only real situation that I would see this being a good case would be if you were trying to do some sort of really nice high-end custom loop water cooling or something like that, more for display than for actual cooling purposes. But other than that, there's really no reason for it to be that wide or anything like that. So I agree with you guys. I don't really see the spot in the market for this case. But I guess we'll see with the sales what happens.
Yeah, does anyone know what the availability of this is? Is it available like now or?
I believe it is. Let me look actually.
Yeah, I mean, Fractal Design hit a home run with the Node, was it 202 recently? I mean, that's a great small form factor case, and then they've come and released this. It's like buying a minivan when a hatchback would have done.
That's actually a very good analogy. But seriously, because you buy the van and you think, oh, I'm going to do all these things, I'm going to have all these people, and I'm going to cart around all this stuff. And you're really not. Like, maybe you'll want to do that once every 3 years. But in actuality, your needs and use case are far more compact, or at least you could get away with putting them in a much more compact car. And then, oh, by the way, now you get greater mileage. Now, it's easier to park and all of this. So.
Yeah, but that's a really common issue, though, because I think the Tech Report did a survey a year or two ago where they just asked all their readers what kind of hardware do you have, and it's a tech review website, so it's very much their reader base is very much enthusiasts, and even amongst enthusiasts, I think it was only a couple percent were using SLI or Crossfire, so dual GPUs, or at least dual cards, and even then, even ignoring GPUs, very few people were running any other card, a second card, like a sound card or anything else. Yet the majority also had an ATX motherboard. So the vast majority of people, even enthusiasts, are only running one card, just a single video card, but they're also doing an ATX motherboard. Of course, some people, you could argue that it's because it's the variety and price of ATX is just a lot better than micro ATX or mini ITX, but it's a common misconception it's something that I see a lot of both online and here at work, that during my day job, because my day job is a computer tech, and I see a lot of people where they ask my opinion on what type of build they should do, and I try to explain to them that they probably don't want a full tower, because it seems nice in theory, but eventually you're gonna realize that say you have to move or something, and it's such a pain to lug it around, and most people just only have a single video card. But I get a lot of resistance to that, because a lot of people, especially first time builders, have kind of this grand ambition that one day that they're gonna do dual video cards and a sound card and a Thunderbolt card, and they're gonna max out the RAM and upgrade the processor and have a RAID array and multiple SSDs and dual DVD drives, and that never happens though. Almost everybody I've talked to, where I kind of mentioned this and they said no, I need a full tower as big as it gets, and I've talked to several of them months or a year or two later, and quite a few of them have regretted that decision. There's just I never upgraded it, and it's kind of a pain having this huge case because I can't take it to my friends easily, and so it's just I think especially it's first time builders that is the problem, is they just think they need all this space and they don't realize that they just really don't.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, and I'm sure it's true with people that are newer to the process of building their own computers. But I've just noticed, I think it's really just this sort of mentality, or dare I say pragmatism, that a lot of system builders adapt, where they feel like it's really important at the design level, when they're choosing components, when they're choosing what enclosure to build inside, that they do their best not to pick apart, not to pick anything that will limit themselves in the future, right? Because there's this perceived cost, it's an obvious cost as well. I don't want to go with micro ATX or mini ITX motherboard, because my goodness, what if I decide I want another graphics card or another PCI device? What if I decide that I really need to dramatically increase the amount of storage I have, or maybe I need more memory? And it's so easy to look at a spec sheet and go, okay, well, I could probably upgrade in the future. I'll probably want to, and then now I can't do this, and now I have to get a new case and a new motherboard and all of this, and it's just awful, awful, awful. And so they just go with what's perceived to be the safe option, in many instances the better option. They just go, okay, well, I'll just pick something that's larger, right? Like, better to have the room and not use it than not have the room and then have to deal with that at the moment that you decide to upgrade. That said, I think most of the time that sort of line of reasoning is totally wrong, and mostly for the reasons that you were expanding upon, James. I think that the vast majority of people have needs or demands, or they end up purchasing parts and devices and whatnot that fit within a relatively tight spectrum of potential builds, all of which are supported by ITX or micro ATX. And I think that there's actually a real and very, very substantial cost associated with having a system that is oversized for your actual needs. I mean, I think in reality, for the vast majority of enthusiasts, the quantity of times and the instances where you're going to need portability, or you're going to need any of the benefits ascribed by a smaller system, far outweighs or far outnumbers any of the instances in which, oh man, you really regret going with the case that was a little bit smaller. Like, I think most of the time, especially for like gamers, the portability factor is actually kind of a big deal. Like, it counts for a lot when you try and sort of calculate, like, what's the utility, what's the benefit, what's the enjoyment I get out of my rig. And I think that's something that we're finally starting to see people in industry and enthusiasts actually begin to recognize and prioritize when they're building stuff. But it's definitely going to be a long road, if only because the challenge with small form factor systems is that it embraces compromise, whereas I think most of the time enthusiasts really just try and avoid compromise at all costs, right? Like, we like to say small form factor systems because it's really easy to convey to people, oh, we just like try and make things smaller. But really what makes small form factor systems great is this idea that there is this happy, optimal point where you've made just the right compromises, where yes, you're limited a little bit, but for that tiny little bit of inconvenience and limitation, you're able to dramatically increase the utility and value of your enclosure because you've made the right compromises. You've made the right decisions where they totally support what you're doing with your case, and they forgo anything that you don't really need or that otherwise might be detrimental to how you use it. And that is a much more complicated, much harder thing for people to sort of wrap their heads around and sort of accept, especially if I've never really thought about it before. And that's why I think you see so much resistance when people are sort of exploring this idea with going with a small form factor enclosure from the get-go, because like learning to accept those compromises or thinking about builds in terms of you're going to make compromises, just try and pick the right ones, that's an exercise that's new to a lot of people, and a lot of people just seem to be kind of uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, and also when you look at a lot of, for a beginner at least, you see a lot of the build guides and logs, it's always ATX, micro ATX, that sort of thing. I've never seen a beginner's guide to PC building with a mini ITX board in it. It's just not something you usually see. And even I notice when people contact me, it's always, what's a Pico PSU? What's an HD Plug? Like, there's a lot of mystery in terms of what small form factor building actually is. So I think we as a community, and obviously smallformfactor.net is doing a great job of putting the information out there so people can say this is really accessible. It's not hard. It's easy. It's just as easy to do as it would be if you were building a full-size system.
Yeah, and I think there's just one more thing. I think there's a lot of misinformation and because I see mostly like the build a PC subreddit is that when somebody's like, hey, I'm a first time builder and I'm thinking of ITX, I see a lot of people respond with, oh no, you don't want to do ITX because it's really difficult to build and
Right.
The cable management's terrible and it's going to run really hot and really noisy. So I think part of it's also just like people don't, maybe, and that may have been true many years ago, but definitely with modern components that run cooler and draw less power, and with newer cases like the N-Case M1, which is actually really easy to build in because you can just take all the panels off. I think that it's partly just people have these preconceived notions of the downsides of mini ITX, which aren't necessarily true anymore.
So I'm going to move on from this case, which was a mere 26.8 liters, onto what many people regard, at least in terms of computer enclosures, as the star of the show at CES. So there was a sort of dramatic announcement and reveal of an enclosure by NZXT by the name of the Manta. And what NZXT seemed to be really bragging about was the aesthetics and the design of this case. It's got these really interesting curved steel panels used throughout the enclosure. There's not really a straight edge to be seen, at least on the outside. And I will give them credit visually, in terms of just purely looking at the appearance of the case. It is very much a distinctive enclosure, and it does look quite nice. Furthermore, the pricing of it's actually quite good for what it is. It's, I believe, $140 plus shipping, although it doesn't ship until sometime in February. So price-wise, it's also actually pretty competitive for what it is. It is an ITX enclosure, so it doesn't support micro ATX or anything. And yet, they were able to somehow find a way to get the volume in the range of 40 plus liters. I think a tighter range will be between somewhere like 44 or 47 liters. And just for context, right? Like, that's practically enough for like four Ncase M1s, like, which supports ostensibly the same amount of hardware. Except you can have 4 of them in the same amount of volume. I mean, this thing is just massive. And the fact that you have these like rotund like design elements, the fact that the panels themselves bow out because they're curved, only adds to like this inflated case or sort of like marshmallow appearance where it just looks far, far, far too large for what it is actually able to do. Now, to NZXT's credit, they never at any point in time use the term small form factor when describing this case. They call it an mITX case, which I feel is still moderately disingenuous, if only because when people think mini ITX, they're honestly thinking small, and this case is anything but small. There exist ATX cases that are smaller than this. But they don't, they don't go with that volume unused. I mean, they have a separated chamber for the power supply versus all the other components. The case is able to support 280 millimeter radiators for liquid cooling, and that is, by the way, with push-pull support for both, I believe. And then they have various storage options and all of this, and presumably I think they give you a decent amount of space in front of the motherboard, so you can have like a dedicated reservoir and pump and all of this. But to me, what I find interesting about this is A, that I like the design so much. I think they did a really good job with that. But B, like, back to the earlier points, we were making with the now tiny in comparison defined Nano S. Like, this is just design run amok. I mean, this was not a single real decision was made in the design of this. And I just laughed when we learned more and more about it, because I just don't understand who the heck would actually want this thing. I don't understand why you would need this much liquid cooling. I don't understand why you would make it so big but only support mini ITX. It's cool. I mean, it looks nice, but I would never recommend it to anyone. I have no idea who would actually stand to benefit from getting this versus nearly anything else. It's just the existence of this case utterly flummoxes me.
2 words: for show. That's it. It's just for show. There's really no other justification for this existing. Water cooling and showing off to your friends and taking post pictures for Instagram and that sort of thing. That's it.
I would put money down that the only ones I will see ever in New Zealand will be in showrooms.
But I mean, I can see that. Like, I agree in principle. It's just that I feel like if that's what you're going for, there's so many better options that can do more with less space and look almost as good. I was like, it was just hilarious to me because at CES they were very, very dramatic about like, oh, we're gonna have a cover on it, oh my god, it's this secret thing, and they have an event where they do a reveal with dramatic music, and then they're like, oh my goodness, look, like curved panels, it's a miracle of modern manufacturing, and it was just like, okay, I guess that's cool, but this thing is 40 liters, like, like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good this is. It doesn't even matter like the price point. Like it's already a broken idea because it's a mini ITX case that's over 40 liters. Like it has already failed by definition. It doesn't matter. Anything else doesn't matter. You've already broken it. Like, come on.
I'm wondering if it was a limitation of the design. They started off with, oh, we'll do this cool curved panel idea and we've got the hardware to do it, but it's only limited to this panel size. What can we actually fit in here? I will just slap an ITX board in there, not a problem, and just run with it.
Yeah, because I'd actually, this would be a much more interesting case if they just added 2 more slots. Just made it micro ATX.
But even then, it's oversized for micro ATX.
It is, but not nearly as bad compared to it being mini ITX.
That is true.
Yeah, I mean, the part of the problem is micro ATX. You'd have to have more depth. But I mean, they have those big old cable management tray and the 2.5-inch drive mounts, which I mean, you could easily have made that into, just shifted that around to make space for micro ATX. So, I mean, really, there's space for an ATX board in here with some modding, and you'll just have to relocate the power supply, but it's doable. So yeah, I would have much rather have seen this in a micro ATX. I think it would be a much more interesting case because then, I mean, you're right, it's still big. But I mean, if you do like dual 390s or something, then yeah, that would start justifying all that radiator space. So I don't know, but mini ITX, yeah, it's way too big.
In its defense, though, it is visually pleasing, especially if you look at the one with the red accents around the edges. It looks really nice, and honestly, I think that's all it was designed to do. So I guess from that standpoint, they nailed it. From a size standpoint, it's awful, but what are you going to do?
If they could build one that's much, much closer to the true small form factor, I would be all over it, because it's a beautiful looking case, but yeah, too big.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the source of my frustration, the frustration of most. Like, it's not like, okay, it's not like the world is a worse place now that this thing exists. It's just that we get it. Like, you guys are really, really good at making cases that really look nice and are compelling. Like, could you make one that we actually want to use? Could you marry that, beautiful aesthetic with actual practicality that applies to this sector of the market? And just time and time again, a lot of companies just seem to really fail in doing that. Like, they aim for small form factor as a segment that they need to have coverage for in their product lineup, but they don't approach designing a small form factor enclosure as this sort of iterative selection of compromises that is what will actually lead you to a case that people want to use. Like, they just see it as, okay, either we'll do like this flagship like thing here, like, oh, it's really flashy and cool, and people will just look at the curvy lines and the awesome new technology and they'll just give us their money, or they'll just take a case that's like, okay, well, we have this ATX case. I mean, we can just make it a little smaller and then it'll fit mITX, and then that'll be small form factor, right? It's like, no, like, the whole point of small form factors were a lot more thoughtful about these things. And if you're not going to be thoughtful in how you design your own enclosure, then we're probably not going to want it, because it's probably not going to work all that well. And we already have a decent number of options available to us, even if we are a small segment.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing though is that, because like we were talking about before with the fractals, a lot of people kind of don't understand the need for a small case. But I am glad, I guess, from our perspective, glad to see that basically every article or forum thread or everywhere that this case has been posted is like half the comments are it's too big. So, I mean, we are starting to see a shift to like people are aware of like kind of what's a good size case for ITX. So hopefully they'll take that into account with the next version.
At this point, it's fairly shocking to me that companies like NZXT, Fractal, wouldn't embrace a HDplex type power source and really make a case that was small and also could handle these same components. I mean, if they made which they could, if they made some sort of power supply HDplex style that could handle 400 watts or 500 watts, they could shrink this case probably and cut a third off of it and make something that looked just as good, could handle all the water cooling, but was actually small. The full-size power supplies really gimp what you can do in terms of space savings.
Yeah, and I think I forget the exact number, but I think like they're like in the specs or is either in the spec sheet. Well, in the spec sheet it'll say, but I think on somewhere I was seeing NZXT reps talking about it. They're like, oh, but it can take ATX power supplies up to like 300 millimeters long or something like that.
363 millimeters.
Which is like, what kind of power supply are you going to put in here that's that big that wouldn't be just absolute total overkill?
You need a 1,000-watt power supply.
It'd have to be like, you can get 1,000 watts in like 180 millimeters. So
1,500 watts.
Yeah, 1,500. Yeah. To power your ITX system. I mean, really.
Challenge accepted.
No, really though, if somebody puts an ATX board in this case within the next 3 months, I will give them $50. Like, it's doable. And
Can you buy me the case?
Low volume is throwing down the gauntlet.
Where's my
reward.
Someone will do it for sure.
Please send all requests and complaints to James. Thank you.
Well, as I said in the last podcast, I at one point figured out that inside the Prodigy you could fit a quad socket motherboard. You could do the same in this, not a problem. Actually, it would be even easier to do it in this case. If I still had the motherboard, I'd be all for it.
You could fit a lot of stuff in this case. There's so much empty space. All that reservoir space, you could jam all sorts of stuff in here.
Yeah, I'd really like to see what like modders are gonna do, because like I mean, you could do a cool custom loop. I mean, that's nice, but I mean, you could do that in just about any case. I'd really like to see like somebody who just completely customizes it, because I mean, like we've mentioned, the exterior does look like it's very striking in appearance. It looks nice, but somebody just completely changes up the internals. That would be interesting to see kind of what people come up with.
I think it would be interesting if someone spent some time with some aluminium and actually made their own truly small form factor version of this case. Because aluminium is relatively easy to form in shapes like this. It'd be interesting to see a community-built clone of it.
But that was actually small?
Yes, actually small.
I'd be in support
Some
of
of the
that.
metalwork I've seen on other mods is absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure someone in the community can do it.
Yeah, well, and to NZXT's point, like, I laugh at them because they're bragging given the size of the case for what it does, but I will say that I can understand why they'd be excited about the idea of being able to introduce curved steel panels. And that's mostly because while that's something that we've been able to do for a long time now, to be able to do that with a production computer enclosure at scale for the price point that they're managing to hit is impressive. Like, they must have found a manufacturer, they must have found some way to reliably reproduce these complex concave steel panels and, you know, build in windows for them. You know, I can totally see why they were excited. So the next thing I want to talk about, just because it continues to relate to cases, and actually this is something, Jay, that you were able to get your hands on and review, but there's this LogicSupply M600, which is this steel enclosure, but I believe the use case is actually for industrial applications rather than expressly for end consumer ones. Even so, though, sort of the layout and the overall design and some of the elements of it were kind of interesting, and I was hoping that you could talk to us about it a little bit.
Yeah, I stumbled on this online a couple months ago. Stumbled across it online. And I just thought it was an interesting case. Well, yes, it is designed for industrial use, so I don't want people to expect the fit and finish that you would normally get from a big company, but it turned out to be a really nice case. Obviously, we have limited options when it comes to small form factor cases, and especially ones that can handle full height graphics cards. So this seemed really cool. So I contacted them, they sent one out, and it turned out to be a really good case. The review is up on Small Form Factor Network, so you can check that out. But really, what it does essentially is it gives you the option of having either a portable gaming rig or a portable work computer, depending on what you want to do. You could run up to a 970 in there because it can take the HDPlex power supply. It cannot use a small form factor power supply at all. No SFX, nothing like that. There's literally no room for really anything else. It's one of the tightest cases I've ever worked with, but it was really nice. I don't know what you guys thought about it from looking at it, but I really liked it personally.
I mean, I will say, obviously this is probably just a product of the customer it's designed for, but in terms of the design, I mean, I think you used no frills in the review, and that's really the best way to put it. Like, it has this nice bright orange cover plate on the front. You got a power button and 2 USB ports exposed, but otherwise, I mean, it is one of the most minimalist, simple designs I think they could have ever managed.
Yeah, the orange and silver color scheme is deceiving because the black sums it up more, because it is very simple, straight edges. There's no frills whatsoever. It's just a very clean, purpose-built case that just works well.
Yeah, and it's remarkably compact too. I mean, like you said, it's not that it could potentially have supported something like SFX. I mean, literally, it's hard to conceive of a way that they could have made it any smaller while still supporting a discrete graphics card. And a mini ITX. I mean, it's basically those two sitting next to each other. You got room underneath the graphics card for some storage, and it uses a ribbon cable to connect that to the motherboard, and just enough space to get wires around all of the various components. I mean, that must have been hard to put the panels on.
They literally, they shaved every millimeter. It takes 60 millimeter by 10 fans. You can't even have a full 60 millimeter fan in there. So they really, really cut the LBs on this one. This is the tightest case I've ever worked with. But it cooled well, surprisingly. I thought I was going to have heat issues with that, but I didn't at all. So I was surprised. But I will say it could use maybe an optional top panel that has cutouts for fans or just for ventilation. That would help, I think, a little bit. But really, the temperatures were consistent, and the case worked out really well.
So, Jay, would you recommend this then to just like a normal user, or would you only recommend it if they just absolutely had to have it, like a case this small?
Right. So that is the question. I would recommend this to someone who, first of all, I wouldn't recommend this as a case that you would get for your first small form factor build. I would recommend this for someone who's done it before and knows exactly the components that they want to use. If you're trying to push the envelope in terms of power, this probably isn't the case for you. If you really want to go all out, 970 overclocked 6700K, you might run into some heat issues. So I wouldn't recommend for that. But if you're just doing maybe like a living room HT-PC or a Steam box, something like that, I put the 950 GTX 950 in there, which stays pretty cool. Fan rarely turns on. So for that kind of use case, it works out really well. If you're going to go with really powerful stuff, probably not the best case for you.
And to be clear, for those who are listening and haven't seen the article, which you can read on Small Form Factor Network, the dimensions of this are 334 millimeters in width, by 64 in height, by 198 in depth, and in inches that's 13.1 by 2.5 by 7.8, which is diminutive. I mean, I'm not sure what the volume is, but that is tiny, tiny, tiny.
Yeah. 4.2 liters.
Yeah, 4.2 liter. That's crazy.
Also, it would be great for modders. If you're a modder, the steel is strong, but it is thin enough that you could easily cut it out. You can get replacement front panels, side panels, whatever you really need. So for a modder, it'd be a really good case to get.
What I'd like to see is them refine the design a little bit, make it a little more consumer friendly, and release it onto the market. So I think it would sell like hotcakes.
It would be interesting. That doesn't appear to be their business model or intent, but I mean, I think they could too. It would be a very interesting case.
Someone could use them as an OEM to do this kind of thing.
That would be fantastic.
What's the price on this?
Just $100.
It is 100, yeah. So considering you think about the Node 202, which I believe is $80 without the power supply, and that's made of plastic, so you're getting a full steel construction here for $100.
Though you'd have to supply your own PCI Express extender, though, don't you?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
They do sell one that fits nicely onto the bracket that comes with the case. It is $25.
Oh, that's not too bad.
So the next thing I want to talk about, guys, and it's a little unusual in that it's not actually, in fact, it's actually very similar to the LogicSupply M600 insofar that it's not really expressly targeted towards the consumer end of the technology spectrum. But I want to talk about FirePro. AMD recently announced the FirePro W 4300, which has 4 gigs of GDDR5 memory, 120-bit memory interface, so that's 96 gigabytes per second of bandwidth. It also has something like 4 mini DisplayPort display outputs, just because, as is tradition with workstation graphics cards, tend to have a lot of display outputs. Now, I know that, especially when you're thinking about gamers or whatnot, there generally doesn't tend to be a lot of attention paid towards workstation graphics because they're very non-competitive when it comes to price. I mean, they're really intended for different workloads. I do think from a small form factor perspective, they do tend to be interesting, if only because a lot of them, for the computing power they have, tend to have coolers and design elements that are a lot friendlier to more restrictive enclosures or more restrictive environments, just because in an enterprise or professional context, oftentimes there will be a need to be able to fit this thing in a pretty small space. I think, Jay, you actually have a build that includes FirePro graphics, if I'm correct.
I have Quadra, which is essentially same ballpark.
Right, so it's the NVIDIA equivalent. Yeah.
Correct, right. And I had a Quadro 4100 before I got the Quadro K1200. What I noticed with running those cards is, for one, they run cooler and the fans are quieter. Obviously, the clock speeds are lower and the performance is not as high. The price to performance ratio is not good at all. But if you're building a system that needs a specific height, length card, then you really can't do any better than that. They make small form factor cards, single slot, half length cards, and really no one else is doing that at all. So you can get, I believe my K1200 gives you around the performance of a 750 Ti, plus it has 4 gigs of RAM, but it's single slot and half height. So there's really no other card in the market like that.
Yeah, and to be clear, that's also the case for this W4300. In fact, across the entire FirePro W series, all of the cards provided are single slot graphics cards, which, funnily enough, is actually far more prevalent on these professional workstation class graphics options, and really is not common at all when you look at most consumer-oriented parts. I mean, the most recent incarnation of a single slot consumer graphics card I've ever heard of was for a 750 Ti, and it was made by like Galaxy or someone, and I don't even know if that ever arrived at market. I just know that they announced it like at CES a year or two ago.
Which is a shame. Because I think there really would be a market for them, even if they didn't have to make them half height. They could be full height cards, but a single slot card would give you some more options and flexibility in terms of running an SLI, that sort of thing. So it would be nice to see some cards come to market that at least were single slot. That would help small form factor builders out a ton.
Yeah, especially if we ever see those mini DTX boards, which is it's for those who don't know, because it's been a standard for quite a while, but we've never really seen a big push on it. But it's a mini ITX board that's extended a little bit, so it's the same width, but the height's a little bit extended to fit a second expansion slot. So if we could ever get some really nice, because they exist, but kind of only as like really, really low end boards. So if we could ever get like an Impact, like a next gen Impact mini DTX with two X16 slots, like a single slot cards to go in that would be amazing.
The real problem with using FirePro or Quadro cards for your build is that they're very expensive. So yes, you could, even if we did get the DTX boards, yes, you could outfit your system with the dual FirePros or Quadros, but it would cost you, $2,000 to get the performance of around a 970. So it's really not worth it.
But I mean, if we saw like, like we're saying, if we could get like consumer cards in single slot and then a mini DTX, that combination would be really nice. I mean, you could do it with like water cooling, but I mean, even if you're not doing dual GPUs, a single slot would be useful for that scenario, because you could have your single slot graphics card in one slot and then leave the other slot open for like, say, like a Thunderbolt card or like a dedicated sound card or capture card or something like that. Right. And then so that way you can have like two cards in. I mean, and really, like mini DTX, I really don't know why they don't do it, because there are a couple like cases that only have like one slot, but almost all mini ITX cases have two slots. So like a mini DTX board would fit in almost all the ITX cases that currently exist. So yeah, if we could get kind of single slot cards, like more options for that on the consumer side, because they only do it on the server or the workstation stuff, because if they're putting it in like a server or something, they want to cram as many cards into a rack unit as they can. So.
The OEMs have the coolers though. That's the thing. The coolers are already built. It's not like it would cost them any money it would cost them money to manufacture more, but it's not going to cost more than it would to manufacture any other cooler. So they could produce these cards, that they just choose not to.
I think that's just because like there just isn't demand for it on the consumer side, because it's just like I said, mini ITX board, most cases have two slots, so if you want to make use of it, you just use a dual slot cooler, so you get better cooling. So it's kind of a chicken and egg problem, I guess. There isn't demand for it on the card side, because there's not any cases that would really, or there's cases and motherboards that would make use of it. But then the reverse problem is true too. Is like, why would you make a motherboard and case for it when there's no cards? So it was just one or the other will have to kind of become a thing before we can really see it take off.
Back to the card itself, the basis for the chip is actually a R7360. This one's just been downclocked a couple hundred megahertz just to bring it under a 50 watt TDP. But in the consumer market, I think the fastest AMD single slot low profile card is a R7250, which is only one step below the 360.
One thing, which we didn't quite talk about during the last episode, I believe this was like pre-CES or at CES that AMD started talking about it, and then of course we just had all this stuff to talk about for the debut episode of Low Volume. But one thing that I think many people, myself included, are looking forward to in 2016 is Polaris, which is the upcoming GPU architecture for basically all of the next generation chips and components we can expect to see from AMD. Now, the big thing about Polaris is that it's sort of finally indicating this movement from the 28 nanometer process that both AMD and NVIDIA have been stuck at for years now, like 3 or 4 years. And it's a movement from that to a FinFET process, which is, I think, 16 to 14 nanometer or so. James, you wrote an article on this at the top of the year. I didn't know if you knew more about this.
Yeah, so what it is actually going to be both 14 and 16 nanometer, which is kind of an odd thing. And so what's happening is that because AMD does not own their own fabs anymore, they sold it off several years ago kind of as a cost-cutting thing when they were restructuring. And so they spun off their fabs into global foundries. And so now they can kind of like the advantage this brings is that they don't have to pay for the cost of building and operating a fab, because that's really expensive. So they can kind of they design a chip and they can just get it built by whoever is best suited for it. Of course, the disadvantage is now they're just a customer of the fab. They don't get all the, I guess, best pricing and all that stuff from like owning it yourself. And plus they can't push the technology as much because it's not theirs. Like Intel can do it because they own the fabs, they design their own fabs, and so they can really push the next process technology, whereas AMD and NVIDIA, since they're relying on third parties to build their chips, are kind of at their mercy as far as like what technology is available, which is why they've both been stuck at 28 nanometers for so long, because I think it was 20 nanometer node, which was supposed to have been the next one, just kept getting delayed, and I think eventually it got canceled. So they both had to kind of scramble for their previous gen parts to kind of just make as much of it as they can with the old process node and try to eke out as much performance and efficiency gains, which they both did a pretty good job of, like NVIDIA with the 900 series and then AMD with, I think it was the 200 series. They both were able to kind of do quite a bit, even though they weren't able to get kind of the normal performance benefits you get out of a smaller transistor. But so what it is with Polaris is that they're going to be dual sourcing. So they're going to be using both, I think it was Global Foundries and TSMC for their chips, though they haven't really said exactly how that's going to work. So Global Foundries will be on a 14 nanometer, and then TSMC will be 16 nanometer. And so, I mean, there's going to be slight differences, like obviously in the process node size, but then also just kind of different foundries. They're going to have slightly different technologies in place. So it's more work to do this because you can't, because AMD will have to kind of, they'll have to design basically twice. So like once for Global Foundries and then once for TSMC. But the thing that they haven't made clear on is like how exactly they're going to split it, like whether they're going to do certain models on one and other models on the other, or they're going to use both for the same models to kind of like maybe help with production volume issues. So not really clear like how they're going to do this or why they're going to do this, like with dual sourcing. So it is going to be both 14 and 16 as far as the process node. But the other thing is like CES, we didn't get a ton of like hard details, like is more like a high level overview. They kind of just talked about like the process node, like we've been talking about. They're making a really big push for efficiency, power efficiency. So like they were showing off, they were showing off a system. They didn't actually show off the card, unfortunately, but it was basically what it is. They had two different systems that were basically identical, like had an i7 of some kind. They didn't really specify which, I don't think. Though I think it's funny that they're using Intel i7 to demo their new GPUs. That kind of says something there. But anyway, so they had Star Wars Battlefront running on these two machines at 1080p on medium settings. And so one machine had a GTX 950, and the other machine had a next-gen Polaris card, though that's all they said about it. It's a next-gen Polaris card. But what was really interesting is they were both getting about the same kind of frame rates and performance, but the NVIDIA, like the whole setup, was pulling about 150 watts from the wall, while the new Polaris system was pulling 88 watts. So you're getting almost like half the, well, not really half, but yeah, quite a bit less power for the same performance. So that's really exciting, though. I mean, kind of the problem is like AMD, since they're also going to get a new process node, it's going to have kind of a similar jump in performance per watt. So it's a little disingenuous comparing it to like what will be a previous gen by the time it comes out. But yeah, anyway, so big leap in power efficiency, which is really, really great for small form factor, because like less power consumption means you don't need as high wattage of a power supply, so you can get away with like SFX or even like HDplex and stuff like that more. But also less power consumption means less heat output, so you won't need as much cooling. So those are both great. But the other thing that I noticed is that, like I said, not a whole lot of hard detail, but they had kind of like a slide deck from their presentation. And several times in like several different slides specifically point out that they're aiming for like new form factors, so like really small systems, I'm assuming, but also like they kind of called out that they're designing for small form factor. It's not just it happens to be small, so you can use it in small form factor, but they're specifically designing for it, which is really great news for us. And then also like one other slide I noticed actually said exactly this. It said discrete cards with less power connectors, which is awesome because like I have dual 980s, and so I don't know why they should have done a single 8-pin because that's all it needs, but they did dual 6-pins. So in order to power both of them, I need 4 6-pin connectors, which is rather annoying because I have to use the splitter for both of them to get them to run off my 600 watt SFX power supply. So if we could get cards of this level of performance with like say like a single 6-pin or even just a single 8-pin, that'll be awesome. Just less cable clutter, just makes it a lot easier. And especially I'd like to see like something like say or just like no power connectors at all, just having stuff that can just run off the motherboard slot which just makes it even easier to do a really small system. So that's really cool that they're really pushing like specifically into small form factor. It's not just like a side effect, like they're really aiming for it, and which it's partly because it's just a side effect of HBM. Like you have all the memory on board the actual, it's on the same chip as the GPU, so that way you just save a lot of space. So it's just, you don't need all that PCB space like you do on a traditional video card. But it's interesting that they're really, really pushing on that. And it's not in the article, but they were showing off at VRLA, which is the Virtual Reality Los Angeles conference. And they had a couple machines there from system integrators, like I think specifically Falcon Northwest had their Tiki, which is their like kind of slim Steambox type case with one of the Fury X2s or whatever they're going to call it, their dual GPU Fury. So this isn't really a Polaris thing, but yeah. So I mean, we are going to see like a dual GPU Fury. So hopefully we'll see like a dual GPU Polaris as well, because that would be really, because between the power efficiency gains, I mean, we should be able to see like a really interesting, like as far as like power consumption and then cooling, like being able, because like a Fury X2 I'm not really that excited for. It's just, I don't know. I mean, especially this late in the game with Polaris coming out later this year, I don't think it's really, I don't really see really much market for it other than kind of like the virtual reality stuff, I guess. But a dual GPU Polaris, I think, will be between the power efficiency gains and everything, I think will be a really compelling option for like a mini ITX build. You can do like a dual GPU and something that's still really small. But I don't know. Considering how long it's taken them to do the Fury X2, I'm not sure what that means for a dual GPU Polaris, but hopefully it won't take nearly as long to do that for Polaris. But that's kind of the other thing, though, is that we've gotten some detail, but they haven't really said a whole lot in terms of like dates or like which models. So like they've committed to releasing in 2016 for sure. I think they've specifically said that, but we haven't really gotten any indication on like, will we see like the high-end cards first, or will we see the low-end cards first, or will everything release together? I haven't really gotten any indication on that, so that's kind of disappointing because it makes it a little hard to plan for. Like if we know for sure that the high-end cards will release in mid 2016, it'd be it's a lot easier to justify kind of like holding off on an upgrade. But like especially like with the Oculus Rift coming out, like pre-orders start shipping in March, I think. So a lot of people are going to need to upgrade for that. And so like if it's going to be that the low-end cards are like mid 2016 and the high-end cards are like more like third quarter, it's going to be a little harder to keep from upgrading to like just something today. So I really wish we get more detail on that, but I mean it's still early in the year, so hopefully that'll kind of become more clear in the next few months.
Do you guys think that they're going to have at least one graphics card that won't require any 6 or 8 pin connectors at all?
Yes. I think that they need to come up with something that was in the realm of what the 750 Ti used to be. I think NVIDIA needs to come up with something around there too. I thought the 950 would be that, but it wasn't. So I could definitely see them coming out with something like that.
I guess my follow-up question would be if they're going to make any that at least third-party companies will turn around and turn into single-slot graphics card options.
Fingers crossed.
Because even with the 750 Ti, we didn't really see that. So
No, yeah, you didn't really see it. No, they did have. There is a low profile one, but not single slot.
So this also rolls into AMD's other new upcoming architecture for 2016, except for this time on the CPU side. And it seems to me that this actually gets a bit more attention, but obviously I'm talking about Zen, right? Which would be 14 nanometer, DDR4 support, and there's very much the sort of intention of unifying a lot of all the disparate architectural principles and designs and features that exist across various segments of AMD's product lines, and just sort of unifying that all underneath this one banner of Zen that's meant to be like, all things for all people, one socket. It supports CPUs as well as APUs, all again in the same socket. And I believe the chipset actually coexists on the actual CPU die or package, similar to AM1. Now, I believe this would have been a while ago because we gathered more details of Zen sort of near the end of 2015. But John, I think you actually wrote up a little bit about sort of the information we do have at this point with regards to what Zen is shaping up to be and what we've seen in terms of a potential product lineup.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, AMD's kind of roadmap at the moment. It seems to be very focused on mainstream small form factor. I mean, we've got companies like Intel who, yes, they're doing small form factor, but it's on their own grounds. It's all compute sticks and NUCs and stuff like that. Whereas AMD seems to be going, okay, this architecture exists, we've got certain form factors, let's roll with this and go see what we can fit into this space. And AM4 and Zen seems to be part of this, especially with dropping down to, once again, 14 nanometers for the process node. Now, it's apparently going to be launching the first generation boards, early to mid this year. I have not yet seen any samples or anything like that. But it's going to be coming with what one was it? I think it was excavator-based architecture, which is similar to Kaveri and Godavari at the moment. Now, that won't be backwards compatible with AM3 Plus or FM2 Plus, unfortunately, but that's need a clean break at this point, because on the CPU side, AMD has been struggling for the last few years. But it just does mean that, yes, in the middle of this year we can start buying AM4 boards, just chuck in a excavator-based CPU, and when Zen's released end of this year, start of next year, we don't know yet, we can just throw in another CPU. I do believe that there will be DDR3 support on it. I don't know why. If they're going to do a clean break with a socket, they need to do a clean break, jump to DDR4. Overall, from what I can see from what's been hinted at for the processors that will be launched in the middle of this year, it's all mid to low wattage processors, 2 to 4 cores, mostly APUs, but at least it's all one socket, and that's the important thing here. At the moment we've got 3 desktop sockets for AMD, and entirely different market aims for each one of them. They run differently, different levels of integration with each one. It's a minefield.
Yeah, and you say like low power, mostly APUs, as if like almost in a dismissive sense, but to me that's actually one of the more exciting areas in which, you know, this new architecture, this unified socket and the new process node and all of this, I think it's one of the most exciting areas where this will become incredibly beneficial to people that exist at that market segment. I think for certain use cases where you want small form factor, but you're not in a need for massive amounts of power, and obviously the one that everyone thinks of would be like a home theater PC or something like that, right? You know, though there exist others, but like I think you know, it would be awesome if we could arrive at a point where for people who are looking for that sort of product, you know, the integrated graphics in an APU style chip, you know, would be enough where they don't really ever need to think about having a separate discrete graphics card anymore. Because once you arrive at a point where you decide, okay, I need to get a separate graphics card, okay, well now I have to think about power, now I have to think about I need an enclosure that's able to store that, now I have to think about cooling and am I able to cool that properly, and like all of these sort of decision points and compromises arise out of the fact that you need this additional discrete part in order to get what you need from a performance perspective. But like the draw of the APU, and hopefully with this iteration of it and this architecture, is that lots of people no longer need to make that choice. What's included on die with the CPU is actually enough to do pretty much anything they need. And that has just so many advantages.
Yeah, the reason why it may sound dismissive of the low to mid-range APUs is because the last 2 or 3 generations of AMD processors just cannot compete with Intel's high-end processors. I know value for money, they're about the same, including motherboard cost. And I mean, I run an FX 8350, so I'm quite a little bit of a power user. So, yeah. It'll be interesting to see if AMD can use Zen and even Excavator on AM4 to somewhat level the playing field.
Yeah, I mean, overall I'm helpful because I do think that they've identified that that's an opportunity that they can take advantage of. And, you know, AMD's in a unique position where, you know, they compete in both the CPU and GPU space, right? Like Intel only recently, would I say, have their integrated graphics become any good at all for any reason, and that's more on mobile than it is on desktop. And obviously, you know, NVIDIA, like they're good at what they do for graphics, but they don't touch the CPU space outside of like ARM chips for mobile solutions. So my hope and my inclination is that AMD just is that one company that is unique in that they cover both of those areas, and you know that they just needed an opportunity to have a clean slate. They needed an opportunity where they were moving to a smaller process node to be able to say, okay, look, you know, we're a master of both of these domains. We can finally sort of coalesce all of these ideas and inventions and innovations that we have developed sort of synchronously over time, and we can finally fold those into like one product that will actually serve a lot of people relatively well. That remains to be seen. They definitely have to prove themselves, but I think just the sheer draw of being able to deliver something like that is certainly something that they've at least thought about, and I hope they've sort of intentionally tried to deliver a range of APUs that sort of service those users.
Yeah, it's a good point that you bring up about the technologies that AMD have, because over the years that AMD has existed, they've generally been first to market with a whole lot of different products. They were the first to market with a dual core that was on a single die. They were first to market with integrated graphics on the CPU. I believe they were first to market with x86 having at least some, like the memory controller on die, and then the rest of the chipset on die. And all of this innovation that, yeah, they're first there, but they never really capitalise on it. They really need to focus on this one and use everything they've worked towards in the past couple of decades and get up to where Intel is in performance or price per... where was I going with that?
Performance price ratio or per
yeah,
watt?
That one.
Per watt.
Well, all of that price per... Yeah, performance per watt and performance per dollar and all of that combined, especially with the aim at the moment with 14 nanometer, 16 nanometer, going towards more efficient architectures. They need to get all of this down into one product. And with how the general PC enthusiast market looks at the moment, everyone's down on AMD. They see an AMD product, no, I don't want it, unless it's the graphics card. They see any AM something socket or FM something socket, no, it's not worth buying.
Which is sort of understandable too, but like, you know, I haven't used AMD parts for a while. I'm not even on a desktop right now. I just have my laptop. But, you know, I feel like it's an important distinction to make that, like, everyone, even like the maddest of Intel fanboys, should hope and want that AMD is successful with this initiative. You know, Intel needs...
Well, if AMD is successful, it'll bring down Intel prices.
Yeah, A, and B, it'll, you know, competition is a really, really important dynamic that is really necessary in this market. I mean, you know, where I think it's easy to think that that might not be the case. Lots of components really only have duopolies at best, right? I mean, it's basically AMD and NVIDIA for graphics, and anyone else that competed in that realm has been gone for a long time now. But you know, even having just two companies doing research and thinking about these problems and trying to work hard towards newer process nodes and addressing markets and industries and whatnot, like having two is far better than having just one and then maybe like a second competitor that no one really talks about. And I'm certainly among those that are fearful of a world where AMD becomes increasingly irrelevant, and that just sort of enables Intel to adapt to a lower pace of innovation, to be able to sort of squeeze even more money out of their customers, especially on the high end, and all of this. So I'm hopeful, like I said earlier, I'm hopeful that we'll see a lot of promising returns on this approach on the APU side, on Zen more generally. I mean, it's exciting. I'm to be honest with you, I'm just sort of nervous. Like I'm nervous that we're going to be a bit underwhelmed by what we get towards the end of the year.
Well, we did have the same deal with Bulldozer. It was hyped up to hell by the media, and then it wasn't that great because A, Windows 7 support wasn't that great, and B, it just wasn't there.
Yeah.
IPC the instructions per clock was not there. AMD really needs to look at VIA for inspiration here, because VIA, Intel, and AMD in the early 2000s were all about on par with x86 performance. VIA stopped doing research, they've gone. They've basically stuck in the industrial area, and they've got nothing anywhere close to what the big two are producing. The main bit I'm concerned about is we need this to happen, because if I'm sure everyone's noticed CPU performance has really stagnated in the last few years. It's not doubling performance like it used to. And as we posted, one of the first articles that we posted up, just as we launched smallformfactor.net, is Moore's Law is basically null and void now, because there's just no competition there.
Well, I mean, it's null and void from a performance perspective. I mean, if you do the literal math and say, okay, performance, but across this process node, and this is power, I think a lot of that is explained away sheerly by saying, okay, look, like, you know, integrated graphics are growing massively in terms of die space on these CPUs. That's taking away from how many transistors are available to them to scale performance. And then a lot of focus has been on energy efficiency, especially since, you know, there have been more and more mobile CPUs being sold and less desktop ones. So architecturally, that's going to be what's prioritized. And that obviously isn't going to scale performance nearly as effectively as we've seen in the past. So I mean, obviously, collectively with that and the delay to moving to new process nodes and Intel sort of veering off their tick-tock cycle a little bit just to compensate for a lot of those difficulties, like summing all of those up, yeah, sure. I mean, we're certainly not able to ride the performance improvements, that were like consistently in the neighborhood of 30-40% every year, every generation that we've been able to in the past. But at least I think for most consumers, that tends to not really be the bottleneck. I think graphics is where there's been a lot more pain, and when there's been even more stagnation, especially in terms of process node. Obviously in the CPU side, it's exciting because both AMD and Intel are finally sort of moving to a new process node, and they're doing a lot of things that are interesting architecturally. But graphics is really where it's going to be just like, woof. Big changes, because we're talking about a huge leap from the 28 nanometer process node to something in the neighborhood of 14 or 16. Obviously, FinFET, it's variable. But that movement alone, I mean, that is around a factor 4x in terms of the number of transistors you can fit in a die of the same size. So literally, you could change nothing else, and if you had a chip that was the same size and you used the same architecture, its performance would increase around 4 times. I mean, obviously, that's not what we're going to see, but like the magnitude of that improvement sheerly from a physical implementation perspective is ginormous, and it's nothing we've really seen for quite some time. So certainly 2016 is shaping up to be an interesting year.
I would disagree a small part on the graphics being the focus. A lot of it is still software developers not developing for multiple cores. I mean, once again, AMD brought out an 8-core going on 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm still struggling to find normal software apart from games that actually takes advantage of those 8 cores, unless it's specific rendering software.
Fair enough.
I've got all these cores sitting there doing nothing. Which it pains me, because in my system I have effectively 4 modules, so 4 modules running at 4 gigahertz, and I'm only ever using maybe 1 of those modules. There's all that wasted speed, all that wasted power, and I'm just waiting on things to load.
I think games are getting better, but I think there's definitely lots of software where developers have just sort of made the choice that I don't really benefit that much by spending all this time to really bring improvements to multi-threaded. And it's just not worth it, because not many people have 8-core processors yet, at least from the perspective of someone developing towards consumers and not professionals.
And saying that, I would kill for the developers of SketchUp to at least do dual core.
Is it seriously not even?
It might be dual core, but it doesn't take advantage of it very much.
Wow, that surprises me.
No, it's not. SketchUp is not really optimized for. I mean, part of the problem is it's really was never intended to be used the way some people use it. It really was intended to be like the name sounds like. It's the 3D version of just scribbling a drawing in your notebook. But yeah, I mean, it's just only recently had a 64-bit version available. I think either the latest version or the previous version introduced that. But even then, that's really more for the memory part of it. It really is not optimized very well for really high detail models. It's you're like John says, it really doesn't make very much use of your cores. But that's also kind of a problem with other CAD packages. I think SolidWorks, I mean, it's a almost $6,000 program, and even that one still is mostly single threaded. So to build a SolidWorks optimized machine, you actually would want a heavily overclocked i5 or something. Yeah. Rather than a really high core count.
That's crazy. That's silly.
But it kind of illustrates the issue that we're having of people not developing for multiple cores. SolidWorks is a high-end CAD package. It's used in the industry, and where seconds account for many, many dollars, and you'd think, okay, speed this process up, we can save our customers this amount of money. It'd be worth it, but no, they're not doing it.
Yeah. So I'd like to end the show with a segment that I hope we're able to do with every episode, and we should have started with the first episode, to be honest. But I want to talk about a particular forum thread, our favorite forum thread that we saw on SFF forum over the last 2 weeks in between episodes. That said, before I actually do that, there is something related to the forum I wanted to talk about, and that we're actually choosing to announce here on this podcast, as well as deliberate about a little more on the forum, since it pertains to the forum itself. And that is of subscriptions, of supporter subscriptions that we're actually going to be introducing to the forum now, if we haven't already, between the time that we're recording this and we actually are able to get it published. Now, as many people are probably aware, up until now, the forum has been run and paid for by myself and James and John, and by that I mean mostly James. And, we've done a lot to sort of ensure that the forum is the best it can be, right? We've spent money on getting a license for Zenfora, which is sort of the nicest and most modern incarnation of a forum platform there is. We obviously have to pay for domain names and hosting costs. We've also implemented things such as SSL certificates, because we think that all decent websites should have them. And all of this work has sort of coalesced not only across the forum, but also the news website, also some other stuff that we're working on. And now we're even doing this podcast. But all of these things collectively do cost money, and in terms of sort of the long-term sustainability of the forum, it's really important that we're able to get some sort of revenue that is able to sort of account for those costs, so that those never become an issue, never become prohibitive to the continuance of any of those web properties in the future. That said, one of the concerns that we all had was that we really didn't want to be in a place where we were like, okay, let's just throw ads all over the place. We're going to make it really, really ugly. It's not going to be pleasant to use, but hey, at least it'll make money and it'll work and whatever. But to us, that's really something we want to avoid, because, one of the things that makes the forum so great is the fact that it's nicely designed, is the fact that it doesn't have any needless distraction, just as small form factor builds are intended to be, enclosures and computers that are well focused. We wanted the forum to sort of convey that same sense and mentality. So we were trying to think of a way in which we could sort of get some revenue to help offset the costs of running the shop. And we realized that a really simple and easy way to do that would be to offer these sort of optional supporter subscriptions that we're now introducing. So to elaborate a bit on what these are, essentially what we're asking for all members of the forum to consider doing is to subscribe and contribute a relatively small amount of money on a monthly basis, hence a subscription. And in return, what we'll be able to do is provide additional forum functionality and other sort of niceties and benefits that you otherwise wouldn't get with the sort of free experience. So to be clear, the forum itself is not changing for anyone who doesn't desire to sort of donate and help support the forum itself. If you have an account now and you're doing things, none of that will change. If you don't have an account, you can still get one. Everyone can still access this information freely. Nothing about the current experience is actually being changed at all. However, if you are interested in some of the additional functionality we've been developing behind the scenes for a while, we'd encourage you, if you go to the forum and click on your little avatar in the top right-hand corner, and you'll see one of the options is account upgrades. We encourage you to navigate to that page and explore some of the supporter tiers that we've introduced. They range from the bronze tier, which is at either $2 a month, or you can subscribe annually and save and only be $20 a year, so you get 2 months off the cost. And that goes all the way up to the gold supporter, which is $8 a month or $80 a year. And if you read through the descriptions, you'll actually see some of the cool things that we're able to provide. So for the bronze supporter status, we give bronze supporters access to a supporters only subforum. So people that only people that subscribe and support the forum are able to access it and have access to those conversations. And we also give you a nice little fancy banner so that everyone on the forum knows that you have supported us. For the silver tier, we introduce some additional features and functionality, some of which are still currently in development, but we'll introduce. But it'll be things like, for newer accounts, the ability to have new post notifications in the favicon, which is sort of a handy feature for your browser, as well as the ability to use animated GIFs for your avatar, things of that nature, a custom title, so it's not based on post count. You can insert whatever you want. And then on the gold level, we have all of that. Plus, we'll give you access to a private IRC chat as well as a private Minecraft server that John actually runs and manages. He's actually really big into Minecraft, which is something I didn't know until recently. So anyway, all of this to say, this is just a manner in which we're hoping to be able to financially support the forum in a way that not only doesn't damage the experience for anyone, but really only enhances the experience for people who would really value those features and who would otherwise like to support the work we're doing and trying to sort of make this community the best it can be and to help enthusiasts really further their interest and passion in small form factor systems. Anyway, so as I said, we're going to wrap up the show by talking about sort of our favorite or most notable forum thread over the past few weeks. And the one that was posted actually by you, John, in mid-January, January 18th, you put out a poll asking everyone on the forum what their preferred power supply form factor was. And this isn't really a question that occurred to me until you had actually sort of written up a little bit about it, and there was some community discussion surrounding about it, because I honestly didn't really realize that there was such a diversity of power supply form factors available, especially on the small form factor end of the spectrum, right? Because like I think most builders, they just think, oh well, there's like ATX and that's it, and maybe you can get a shorter one, maybe you can get a longer one, but it's ATX. And I still clearly wrongly have the mentality of like, oh, there's SFX, right? And oh, if you want it a little longer, well, there's SFX-L, and that's kind of it. But that's just, that's really not true at all. I mean, obviously there's ATX if you must. For some small cases will support that. You have SFX and SFX-L, but you also have Flex ATX. You have 1U, which is typical for server chassis. You have Pico PSU. You have HD Plex. Like, there are actually a lot of options that small form factor enthusiasts can avail themselves of, and computer enclosure designers can avail themselves of. And I just, as sort of people selected which one they preferred, but also explained their reasoning behind why they liked it. It was just a really, really interesting conversation to watch unfold, just to see like, oh, I've never really thought about this. Like, I can see why someone for their use case might value one feature over the other. And it was just a fascinating dialogue to really sort of sit and be a spectator for.
I thought it would be an interesting question. I mean, even in the poll options that I did provide, there's a lot of ambiguity there. In the HD Plex style power supplies, yeah, you've got the traditional HD Plex ones, but you've got ones that are as small as a Pico PSU, but standalone, and anything up to something the size of a 3.5-inch hard drive. And you've got different power adapters for that kind of thing. Flex ATX has got flexibility in the style. I didn't put in TFX, which is another power supply for small form factor systems. Whoops. But it's interesting in a couple of things. One, nobody picked ATX.
Thank goodness.
And two, nobody picked 1U.
That surprised me more.
Yeah.
1U
is basically Flex ATX with maybe 10 mil each side added to the width. And louder fans, but you can change those.
Times 40 for loudness.
They do tend to be incredibly loud.
It really depends, because if I remember rightly, the EVGA Hadron case actually uses a 1U form factor power supply, and it's not that loud.
I bought a Hadron. I would not say that it's a quiet case. I took it back immediately.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I'll put it this way. At one point in time, I was running a small form factor system with a full-blown 500-watt 1U power supply. The Hadron's going to be quieter.
Probably, yeah.
These ones are dual impeller 40 by 40 by 40 fans, and there's two of them in the chassis.
Oh my goodness.
Jeez.
I mean, for context, that 1U is really designed for like an enterprise context, and they don't
Right.
care about
Service.
noise. They just care about reliability.
Exactly.
They're like, I don't care how loud the fan is, just never fail. Never.
Have
ever
you ever walked
fail.
into a data center?
Yeah. Oh no.
Yes.
At work I have, and it's deafening. It's a weird sort of noise because it's like so many fans, and you'll have like AC and other cooling systems, and there's not like one distinct fan noise. They just sort of meld into this ringing and humming. But
Yes.
like you cannot stay in a rack of servers for more than like a half hour at a time because you get a headache.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
bad.
overwhelming.
What are you guys' actual favorites? What did you guys? I'm guessing you guys voted.
I didn't vote.
You didn't
Wow,
vote in your
you
own
didn't even
poll.
vote in your own
Come
poll.
on. Come on.
But what would you say is your preferred form factor? You don't have to vote, but what would you say is your preference?
That's the problem because I've built so diverse systems that it's really hard for me to judge. I've built, as I said, a system with 1U power supply. I've done Pico PSU. I've done DC to DC. I've done SFX, and with each different system, I've needed a completely different form factor of power supply, and with my slightly designy mind, I changed my system style completely between each different generation that I've had. It's really hard to pick a favorite. If I had to pick a favorite, it'd probably be the Pico PSU because I hate cables.
I would say, personally, HD Plex is probably the best, in my opinion, in terms of being versatile and small. I would have to agree, though. I love the Pico PSU because even though the HD Plex is very small, it takes up some space. A very small amount, but it is some space. Pico PSU literally essentially takes up no space. Just your ATX connector and the cables coming off of it. It's amazing how much power you can squeeze out of those guys.
I kind of hope that the company that started the Pico PSU actually keeps developing that form factor. Because I've seen one's on eBay. I don't know if they actually can do it, but off 12 volts they can do basically 180, 190 watts. I know the design of the Pico PSU is such that you can pull it way above that if you're pulling the power off the 12 watt rail. But I would like to see a 250 watt Pico PSU because a lot of people see, oh, this one only does 150 watts. I can't use this for my system, even though in reality, a 150 watt Pico PSU could run a 250 watt modern system.
Oh yeah, they can handle much higher loads. Yeah, if they developed one with a power brick that went along with it, a nice kit, like Minibox is the site that I usually get mine from, and if they could come up with a kit that did, like 225, 250, that would be huge.
So I have to admit, I am the square in the room. I didn't pick ATX, thank goodness. You should have just fired me if I'd picked ATX. But I did pick SFX, and I did it for a few reasons. First being, other than ATX, it's the only of the form factors that I've actually worked with. I've not personally built anything with Flex ATX or 1U or Pico PSU or HD Plex or any of these, in part because some of them kind of only came to form or came to being used by people like after the last desktop station I built. But to be honest, I think the main reason why I voted for SFX, and I elaborated as such on the forum thread, is that I really feel that it has the most coverage in terms of being the best option for most people. Like, when I think of where I would like the direction of power supplies in general to go, I think it's easy to envision a world where everyone sort of realizes, other than that top 5-10% of builds that have like 3 graphics cards, SFX and SFX-L really cover, in terms of like power delivery and features and whatever, everything that pretty much anyone needs anyway. And you can get down to incredibly small enclosures in the area of like 5-6 liters or so and still robustly support the SFX form factor and get all the benefits of like, okay, you have cables, but they're annoying, but then you have the modularity of being able to support all these things, and the power delivery you can get as high as 700 watts, and it's a modality of powering components that will be familiar to anyone because it's the same one that you've seen with ATX, and obviously that's a much more common form factor at this point. So I picked SFX only because I'm familiar with it. and because I think it is the form factor that is, generally speaking, the best for the most number of people. And even though it is larger than some of these other ones, I don't think that's terribly limiting in terms of the form factors you can achieve with it. For what it is quite tiny.
I think this is where I say this is this exact same mindset why we're still stuck with ATX. Because it's so flex, it covers so many different use cases.
I mean, I guess you have a point, but...
With you saying before that small form factor is about making intelligent compromises, we need to be able to see that, the community needs all of this different power supplies.
Sure.
So as much as everyone has a favorite, we still need all of these different products.
No, absolutely. And to me, I think that was the greatest part of this forum thread, was that it gave visibility to all of these that I hadn't appreciated before, and I'd imagine lots of other people hadn't appreciated before. And I guarantee you that even the smart, intelligent people on this forum have probably not been aware of all of these, or maybe have thought about builds but haven't considered some of these form factors that might be better options for them, dependent on what they're actually looking for. So, if anything, this was just a lesson in, like, do your due diligence and really consider the variety of options that are sort of available to you when it comes to the form factor of the components you use in your build, because those, more than anything else, are going to dictate everything from the size of the computer as a whole down to what it's actually able to do to you at a practical level, what utility you're going to be able to get out of it. I couldn't agree more. I think that, to me, was the best part of this thread, period.
Yeah, I would like to invite the listeners to this podcast to go and vote on your favourite form factor. I've now added TFX to the poll. I don't know if anyone will vote for it, but it's there. And if there's any others, just post it in there. I can add it to the poll, because I'm sure I've forgotten 2 or 3 different form factors that exist.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me is HDplex is leading, and not by a little bit either. It's got 1/3 of the vote right now, so...
It's a beast. I'm actually changing my vote to ATX, so... Sorry,
Works
guys.
for everyone, right?
Get out.
The fact that there exist, like, full computers that are smaller than ATX power supplies, to me, is what...
Mine's pretty close.
I know.
Mine is pretty close. Yeah, if you get 1,000-watt extended ATX, yeah, mine's pretty close. That's saying a lot. That's sad.
There was a build a while ago. I believe it was a model by the name of Slippery Skip. He actually used one of the old VIA motherboards, the little, I think it was Pico ITX, and he built it inside an ATX power supply case.
And it actually works, because you have, like, the fan
works.
on top, and...
That's awesome.
Wow, that's
a great idea, actually.
And if anyone's wondering, the link to that will be in the show notes, and I've just posted in the notes of the guys.
My goodness. That's so great. Like, you show up at, like, a LAN event, and people are like, dude, what are you doing? You brought a power supply? And you're like, the computer is in the power supply.
The most amusing part of this is that he built it in this case, the ATX case, had all the fake cables hanging out of it, installed it in an ATX case.
Wow.
And just put a little disco ball in the case. But he's got a full 2.5 inch hard drive and everything in the system.
That's awesome.
That is fantastic. I applaud this person's efforts. Wow.
Which makes me think mini STX might actually have a use.
Oh man, this is hilarious.
Well,
kudos to them though. This is the sort of thing I wish I was able to do. My goodness.
well, if they have like a PCI Express M.2 slot on the mini STX, then you could in theory use an extender for that too, and have like maybe a discrete GPU in there too, like maybe like a Nano, like something the size of the Nano. So that'd be quite a setup.
Come on,
That
one
would
of
be
our
hilarious.
listeners, please deliver. You can do this. We'll talk about it. I promise. Oh man. All right. Well, on that note, guys, I think we got to wrap it up. But I think I had a fun time. I think this is a good show. How about you guys?
No, no fun.
Well, I guess signing off on our final episode of Small Form Factor Forum. My name's Joshua Ramirez. We've been joined today by James Schell, John Morrison, and Jay Mattison, the 4 Js. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you guys next time.